Hello, this is Dr. Dave Maslach talking about reciprocity.com. The E is written with a 3. I'm a professor of innovation, strategy, and entrepreneurship. And today I really want to talk about what are the advantages and disadvantages of cloud computing. What are some pros and cons of cloud computing? We often hear about cloud computing. So what I'm going to do is define exactly what it is and then get into some, known advantages and disadvantages with cloud computing. There's a lot of benefit and lots of not so much benefit with doing the cloud computing route. And you should be well aware of what you're doing when you're going into doing cloud computing. So what exactly is cloud computing? It's essentially you're just using the remote servers and stuff on somebody else's that somebody else owns, that can store data as well as retrieve the data when you need it, and as well as compute and make sense of the particular data that you have. So you get somebody else, another provider, an outsourced provider, I guess, like a software solution provider, and they are providing some sort of service for you where they're storing the data. It could be multiple different companies again, and there's lots of really big companies that are out there. Extremely big companies have been doing this for years and years and years. So some of them store data and they do a very good job of storing data. Some of them, that they present the data in different ways with different visualizations. And then there is, other ones that allow you to combine all of those together, and you can make inferences and compute and make better decisions with this data that you're storing or something along those lines, right? So it's basically any combination of those. And there truly is a general trend towards cloud computing. It is moving towards, a lot of people are moving towards the cloud computing sort of area, and lots of people are using cloud services. And what do I mean by cloud? First of all, well, that is just the idea that there's many distributed entities that are interconnected. So if you think of what a cloud is, there's all these molecules, they're kind of interconnected, they're loosely connected, but they provide some bigger thing, right? So like a cloud does a bigger thing than sort of these individual sort of services that are interconnecting. So, there's lots of different business models in this area that you can choose. But in general, what I'm going to get into, what are the advantages and disadvantages of cloud computing? So what are the advantages of cloud computing? Well, some pros of cloud computing is that, cloud computing does reduce in-house redundancy. So often you'll get, if you're creating some sort of software solution or something like that, and you're trying to create your in-house sort of solution, you're going to need a lot of extra people to manage the servers, to, just be administrators of everything. You're also going to have to require physical space. Some of these things, particularly if you're storing data, it gets really big, and the energy costs get very, very high. It gets very expensive because these servers get hot, and as you get more and more, it gets hotter and hotter, and it does get expensive. So, an advantage of cloud computing is that you can reduce your costs substantially if you are, if you're sort of worried about that, which we all are. But I wanted to point out that sometimes it doesn't quite make sense to do this depending on the services that you're looking for. So you have to be careful, and you have to do a cost benefit analysis of whatever it is. Just do a quick one to see, is it cheaper for me to do this myself, or is it cheaper to go with a particular cloud services? And you just have to use those you have to make sense of that. The other thing that I wanted to point out is that it does require less personnel, and sometimes that is a good thing, right? Because you don't have to have all these administrators and things like that. You just have to have a couple that understand the cloud computing platform that you're using. Maybe it's on Google, for example, Amazon Web Services. I mean, there's a bunch. And as long as they understand how those things work, then you're good. You're good as golden, right? But you don't need all of the people that need to understand the physical hardware and things like that. Sometimes it requires, a fourth thing. Sometimes it requires less sort of updating, and you don't have to. And updating means I'm really talking about the physical hardware, because that is one of the problems actually with owning your own physical hardware. If you own it, then it's going to be out of date in a couple of months, and a lot of people find that really frustrating because you're constantly having to update the physical hardware because it's constantly changing, right? The technology is constantly changing and getting better. Um, a nice thing, a couple of other nice things with cloud computing is that it allows you to take advantage of redundancies and specializations that they have that you wouldn't possibly be able to afford if you're using those particular services. Sometimes they add different features, and they also have data storage redundancy. So instead of you having maybe two sort of sets of redundant servers that are protecting your data, they might have 10, right, that are protecting your data, and they're all distributed. And which means that if there's anything that goes down or if there's a problem, they have data storage, that data in all those different services. And maybe it's you're connecting to the internet. That nothing's ever going to go down. You're not going to have very little. You're going to have little problems compared to if you own your own, and it'd be a little bit tough, I guess, to manage your own cloud computing service. The other thing that I forgot to, or I haven't yet mentioned, is that it's really scalable, which is really nice. I think that's a big thing, particularly if you're a startup or something like that. It scales really nicely. A lot of the new cloud computing services, they scale very, very easily. They go from one scalable going means from, you have one user to a million users, and it really doesn't matter which one you're using, right? You can easily scale up and down as you grow your business, which is really, really nice because you don't have to worry about all the different complexity and stuff that happens when you go through different, levels of your business and as it grows. So what are some disadvantages with cloud computing? There's lots of different pros, and benefits of cloud computing, but there's obviously disadvantages with cloud computing, and they're really real. The first one that I think is the biggest one is you lack control over things that are going on. So if you really need to worry about security, for example, they'll say that they're secure, and that they're secure, but they're as secure as they manage it, right? So whatever cloud computing service you're using or cloud computing, provider that you're using, it's as secure as they make it. So you don't have control over that. If you have control over that, then sometimes if you have something that you're really worried about, then you have control of that security. You can invest a little bit more in those particular secure features and things like that they may or may not do, and you're not you're just not in control of that, and that's a big thing. The other thing is that it adds a layer of complexity. Anytime that you are outsourcing a component or outsourcing anything in an organization or a business, it just adds a lot more complexity because you have to report to them and talk to them, and you're doing this back and forth thing, and that sometimes and that's called the transaction cost, and that sometimes is really frustrating. And often you might find it easier just to do it yourself compared to get somebody else to involve, particularly if you're skilled in that area. If you're not skilled, then obviously it makes sense to go to something else. And we're all not skilled in stuff, right? So there's nothing to be ashamed of. To be honest, I wouldn't be able to know how to do a lot of the programming and stuff that I could, but I have Reciprocity, this sort of cloud computing website, or this cloud website that I'm using. But I have developers that are going out and getting this and organizing it and stuff. I want to specialize with my time, right? It's really difficult to do all of those things all at once. It's easier to get somebody else to do it, and I'm not going to be up and up on all that kind of stuff. So that's totally fine with not having that sort of ability. But then you're relying on other people, and people let you down all the time. You just have to roll with the punches. Part of managing, that you have to roll with the punches when people don't do things that are as promised, and that's going to happen a lot more when you're outsourcing things and you're getting somebody else to do it. The other thing is, and this is kind of related, is that sometimes you have poor service and there's not much you could do. And once you are sort of locked in with one provider, it's hard to switch. You can switch, but it's going to take a significant investment to switch to another provider. And if you're worried about the service and things like that, sometimes you're better off to do it yourself because you have control again over this kind of you have control over the different computing and data storage and stuff like that. So the last thing is, and I mentioned it could be cheaper, but it also could be a lot more expensive depending on what you're doing, because they'll throw in things that you don't necessarily need, and you don't know if you need that or not, and you are kind of confused, right? It's going to be really expensive sometimes, and you're going to overpay for different features and stuff like that you wouldn't necessarily do. So you have to do a cost-benefit analysis and sort of think about, do you actually need this? Do you need that? And if you don't, then maybe a bare bones system is a lot better, and doing something that's really simple than going with a complicated cloud computing service, right? And you talk to the salespeople, they're going to sell you on stuff, and you don't want that, right? You don't want to be sold on stuff. So there's lots of pros and cons with cloud computing. What I would do if I was if you're sort of starting out and it's small, whatever you have, or if you have something that's really big. So it depends on what you have. So if you have something that's small, a business or some sort of service that's small, just do a bunch of reading on your own, find out whether you need that thing. If you don't need it, then don't get it. And if you do need it, whatever that cloud computing service is, then yeah, maybe it's a good idea. As you grow, what you're going to do is maybe talk to some of the salespeople that they have. Talk to consultants are really good at this kind of stuff because they're a third party that might be able to give you some advice. So you might be able to talk to different consultants to give you some advice on what to do. And then pay for their services, obviously, and you might get a better solution in the long run. But again, you have to realize that it takes a long time. It's really difficult to sort of implement this kind of stuff, but it's just part of the battle, right? That you have to be part of all this kind of stuff and move forward with it. So if you're interested in more videos about this kind of stuff, I have a bunch of different videos that are related. Put them in the show notes, as well as give me a thumbs up if you like this video. I can do more of these kind of things. And as well as do subscribe to the channel. Do appreciate it. So that's it. Have a wonderful day and take care.